to put Tonga away. Meanwhile,
the Bloodline story continues to take a new shape and a new form with its newest revelation of players. After multiple structural changes in 2023 that saw the honorary member Sami Zayn defecting and costing the Usos their record-breaking tag team titles, the Usos breaking up, then Jimmy rejoining the faction only to be kicked out 8 months later, Roman Reigns being humbled back into humanity by Cody Rhodes. Yeah, 2024 saw more major shifts, and The Rock, the biggest movie star in the world, would be the biggest addition to the Bloodline so far. But the Samoan faction that has ruled over wrestling is truly reeling and on the ropes. But around the same time, it was rumored that another name, the Samoan werewolf, could be howling his way into the WWE with a long-anticipated contract. Let's get into it. This is Sportskeeda Wrestling. I'm Kevin. Let us know what you think of the new names and the new big name coming to WWE to join the Bloodline, reportedly. Jacob Fatu has been dubbed the Samoan werewolf for all of the right reasons. And although it's not officially announced by any of the parties involved, when the rumor got going around WrestleMania 40 that this superstar signing was actually going to happen, that traction with multiple sources were reporting it, it normally turns out to be quite true. And it was expected that Fatu would make his debut a little bit after WrestleMania 40, and it was also kind of obvious where he was going to be slotted in with his family roots, the Bloodline. Instead, in a big twist, it was adopted son of Haku, Tama, who had success in New Japan Pro Wrestling, who would come in and replace Jimmy Uso in the Bloodline in their post-WrestleMania shakeup. A month later, his brother Tonga, who also had success in New Japan Pro Wrestling and a previous run in WWE, would make a shocking return and become the Bloodline's newest member at Backlash. While both Tonga and Tonga debuted, there was only one question on the minds of smart wrestling fans following those dirt sheets. When on earth were we going to get the seismic impact of this Jacob Fatu that we've been hearing about? It doesn't seem to be the case with WWE being out of touch, but simply a calculated presentation of when Jacob will make his presence known and have the most impact possible. There was even rumors going around that WWE was worried that Jacob Fatu would outshine Solo Sikoa, the de facto leader of the Bloodline, in Roman Reigns' absence. While there's a good chance that the report is just internet gossip, it seems like the conversation among fans who are aware of Jacob Fatu's body of work means that there's some real potential there. Does it seem inevitable that Jacob Fatu will actually outshine Solo Sikoa? That's just speculative at this point. So before we dive into how Jacob Fatu is going to change the Bloodline and maybe WWE from this point forward, let's introduce you to this guy they're calling the Samoan werewolf. At 6 foot even and 279 pounds, he is seen by many as one of the most agile and dynamic big men in pro wrestling. Imagine someone who doesn't look like a cruiserweight, but can move like Rey Mysterio with a lot more weight on him. He's had some of the most impressive matches outside of WWE, and beyond that, he comes from the gigantic Anoa'i family tree. Let's explain where he comes from with all of those very gifted genetics. Fatu is the son of Sam Fatu, who went widely by the name the Tonga Kid and even Tama for a while. He too had some success in televised pro wrestling. Sam Fatu is the nephew of Afa and Sika Anoa'i. Sika is Roman Reigns' father. They were the Wild Samoans, widely regarded as one of the greatest tag teams of the 1980s, and they are WWE Hall of Famers. Anyway, Sam Fatu is the twin brother of Rikishi, which means that the late great Umaga was also his brother. So yeah, the roots run deep for him. He's familiar with quite a few people that are already successful in WWE. Sam Fatu is best known for being a part of the team of the Islanders, along with Haku, who we previously mentioned is the father of Tama and Tonga. So in addition to being the direct cousin to the Usos, Solo Sikoa, Roman Reigns, Jacob Fatu has ties to Tama and Tonga because his father's longtime association with Haku. Yeah, this guy can move, and he's got a lot of connections in this business. He's been getting ready for this opportunity for quite some time. So what is all this hype about? Trust us when we say this. This isn't just any wrestler. Jacob Fatu is different from every single member of the Anoa'i family that he'll be compared to. And we're talking past and present. So what exactly has his wrestling career looked like before signing with the WWE? You would think that simply watching several of his family members succeed in wrestling would be enough to motivate him to lace up the boots. But he actually ended up getting the motivation under different circumstances. Yes, he did get inspired watching his cousins the Usos debut on Raw in 2010, but he didn't do it sitting in the comfort of his home. The 18-year-old Jacob Fatu watched his cousins debut while sitting in a jail cell serving time for robbery. According to Jacob himself, this inspired him to turn his life around, and within 2 years, he began training under his uncle, Rikishi. Some might argue that having direct connections with multiple past and future WWE Hall of Famers made it easy for someone like him to find work. And while it might be true to some extent, can you really blame anybody here? He would go on to spend most of his 20s earning his chops and honing his craft on the independent wrestling scene, primarily for the west coast of California. He often teamed with his fellow Samoan family members like Black Pearl, and Jacob Fatu took his time finally beginning to unlock his true potential before the major leagues were coming. And by major leagues, we mean Major League Wrestling, or MLW, where he got his first opportunity signing a multi-year contract with the promotion led by former WWE writer Court Bauer. It was the first time Fatu got to be seen by a relatively bigger audience and be on television. It was like lightning in a bottle for both him and MLW. And by this point, he was 7 years into his wrestling career, and MLW knew the potential they had with him. Along with creating a stable featuring stars like himself and ex-WWE superstar Simon Gotch, Fatu took only a little over half a year to capture the MLW World Heavyweight Championship from former UFC fighter Tom Lawler. They began a dominant 819-day run as MLW World Heavyweight Champion, during which he headlined their first ever pay-per-view and defeated Mexican wrestling legend L.A. Park. MLW and Jacob Fatu really proved to be a match made in heaven, which is probably why he was their world champion for over 2 years. Looks like record-breaking title reigns are not just something that happens for certain members of the Anoa'i family. Fatu proved to be dominant in every sense of the word, but it really was the it factor that he had. He showed during this time that led to major multiple wrestling promotions having their eyes on him. He seemed to have it all. Like we said, he can move like a cruiserweight and had the power of a heavyweight. His speed and power combined led to him hitting his opponents like a wrecking ball at full speed while still giving you a sneer and grimacing look that could stop a semi-truck. Oh, and those Samoan drops, nobody in the world does it better than him. His character was presented as it should be, dominant and ruthless. During that MLW run, he even turned babyface and showed that he had a dynamic ability to be a good guy and play the other side of the table. Proving his versatility as a performer, which is arguably one of the most important traits that any wrestler needs, especially if they want to make it in WWE in the future. Just watch Jacob Fatu's match against his Contra unit member, the 7-foot-tall Mads Kruger. It was a weapon of mass destruction match and proved how great he works as a good guy. Seriously, you need to watch it. It's free on MLW's YouTube channel. You can also check out a bunch of his other big matches there too. And if you're wondering what the hell a weapons of mass destruction match is, it's basically no DQ, anything goes type of match, but with the military grade equipment fortified around ringside. It's also military cases containing mysterious weapons. If you're not wondering, that sounds freaking awesome. And when we describe the it factor, we should clarify that it's a combination of multiple traits, a dominant in-ring persona, a versatility in character, and very importantly, the ability to tell a story in the ring. That ability to pace it the right way and tell the story bell to bell is far superior than just flashy moves. Certainly those help, but Fatu is the type of guy who can do both and use one to prop up the other. For 5 years, he grinded it out and made a name for himself as one of the premier talents in wrestling outside of WWE. And yeah, we're not talking about AEW. He's the guy that put MLW on the map. For those watching, it was a beautiful culmination of a wrestler putting in years of hard work and efforts finally coming to fruition. During the duration of the Bloodline story, he was asked multiple times in interviews about his thoughts on the Bloodline, his family, what they were doing, and more importantly, if people were ever going to see him in that mix. His response was always stoic and mature, understanding that while he would love the opportunity to be with his family members in the WWE, it would happen if it was meant to be. And if it wasn't, he could still enjoy watching his family killing it and being a fan, while he killed it himself. But as the Bloodline story progressed, and Fatu himself also progressed on his own path in MLW and other promotions, the question really became about not if, but when he would sign with WWE. Booker T, who is also directly associated with Zilla Fatu, the son of Umaga and Jacob's cousin, revealed in an interview with Russell Rand that he was personally trying to ensure that Jacob Fatu got signed by WWE. It's important, worth noting, that WWE Hall of Famer Booker T has his own wrestling training school, Reality of Wrestling, and that he has so much experience that it only takes him 2 minutes to recognize that someone has it or they don't. Booker T's words might be prophetic. In time, when you hear the words come from his mouth, you will never forget Jacob Fatu. When 2024 came around, it was revealed that Jacob Fatu was not signing a new deal with MLW, making him the hottest free agent in pro wrestling. One can only imagine that companies like New Japan Pro Wrestling, AEW, and WWE were all keeping their tabs on his status. Unlike many of his other cousins, he avoided taking the conventional path to WWE and made the wise choice of working his way up to the point where he simply could not be denied. Even wrestling veteran Jim Cornette, who is one of the hardest critics of everything in wrestling, let out a big "awoo" at the reports that Fatu was signing with WWE and couldn't help but contain his excitement for what could be in the future. It's been clear for a while now that many important people in the wrestling industry have their eyes on Jacob Fatu. And while using his Samoan heritage and his influence of his family to build his character, Fatu has managed to take it onto an entirely different level and separate himself from the rest, all by his own merit, bell to bell. You may not believe us when we say this, but all of what we mentioned so far is only really scratching the surface of why there's so much hype around this man. So let's get to the heart of what this video is about in the first place. What exactly is Jacob Fatu going to do in the Bloodline in WWE? If it wasn't clear enough by now, he is completely a different wrestler than his cousins or anybody before him in the great Anoa'i dynasty. There's nothing wrong with them, but there's something special about him. And we're not going to go into details of how he can be introduced in WWE or just straight up fantasy book him, but his presence alone is going to send shockwaves through the Bloodline. He needs to be more than just an enforcer. We've seen enforcer roles before time and time again, and sure, they have their place, but this is Jacob Fatu. He's so much more than just a simple supporting character, an enforcer. He needs to be an assassin of the Bloodline, a lethal warhead. Now, obviously, this is pure speculation, but there seems to be signs leading to a Bloodline civil war down the line. Roman Reigns' absence, Solo Sikoa's takeover, the possibility of a certain TKO board member pulling the strings, the new names entering the mix, the divide, the tensions, they all point to a future crushing war within the family of wrestling's biggest dynasty. Whether he plays Roman Reigns' secret weapon or the Rock's tool of destruction, Jacob may very well steal the spotlight and maybe even become the biggest focus of the Bloodline. And if you're saying like, what? No, he can do it. There's a bit of a risk that WWE has with the storyline that has been going through nearly half a decade now. But this storyline has a legacy of decades before in real life to build upon. And Jacob is a part of that. Could we fall into the same issues that WCW had with the NWO faction that was so over by prolonging the story on year's end and year's end? Yeah, before it eventually dried up. Thankfully, WWE has the benefit in hindsight to learn from those mistakes of the past. Jacob Fatu and company have the potential to become central figures in this storyline very quickly, and could even take the role of maybe greater importance than Roman Reigns. I know, once again, you're going to be freaking out in the comments after that one. This isn't to say that he's going to be the star at Roman Reigns' caliber, but the ultimate goal should be turning Jacob Fatu into a superstar in his own right in the years to come. WWE needs to play into the mystique he has and protect him the same way he's been protected by many wrestling companies before, big or small. They all knew he wasn't just another guy. And while the pillars of the story might be the big names, Roman, Solo, the Usos, maybe even The Rock, Jacob is likely going to be set up as the biggest threat from the family, as he should be presented. Their role will be in making him. His role will be in making them. The Bloodline is going to be way too big at this point to keep them as one steady unit. And perhaps it's Jacob Fatu, as well as the return of Roman, that will finally see the Bloodline officially split into two separate factions. In conclusion, it's all a matter of timing when it comes to Jacob Fatu and his WWE debut. The Bloodline is setting up a new generation, and Jacob is a prime position player to be a breakout star from this batch. We can understand that some people are saying that Jacob Fatu should be kept away from the Anoa'i family and allowed to shine on his own, but considering how things seem to be getting set up with Roman, Solo, Sikoa, possibly The Rock and others, it only makes sense that Jacob Fatu will be the one to shake up the Bloodline forever. Imagine him defeating Roman Reigns in a one-sided match like we've seen before. His impact will hopefully last longer after the entire faction dissolves on camera for good. Oh, you want to know the crazy part? Jacob Fatu has 7 freaking children, so the future of the Anoa'i family seems to be more secure than ever. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out our video on the extensive history of the Anoa'i family in the Samoan wrestling dynasty.